Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through time into sandstone corridors where the flicker of oil lamps dances on ancient walls. You're standing in front of a weathered carving, its edges softened by 3,000 years of wind and worship. It shows a woman, not grinding grain, not nursing a child, but standing tall, arm outstretched, pointing decisively at two kneeling scribes. Her jaw is square. Her posture says, "I'm in charge." You were expecting Cleopatra, maybe, or a nameless queen in a flowing headdress. But this is someone else. A merchant's wife? A priestess? No title is inscribed. Yet the image speaks louder than any chiseled name ever could. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your city and local time. I love knowing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sand crunches under your feet as you follow the corridor deeper into the tomb. Around you, symbols swirl, ankhs, lotuses, falcons, but your eyes keep returning to the figures of women, on walls, on pottery, etched into amulets worn smooth by time. And strangely, many of them aren't in the background. Historians still argue whether these images reflect real societal roles or just symbolic flattery. But the consistency is striking. Women shown giving orders, making offerings, holding titles. One holds a scribal palette, typically reserved for men. Her eyes serene, her hand mid-sentence. You duck under a doorway and emerge into a broader chamber. On the far wall, a scene unfolds. A woman in a linen-sheathed dress stands beside an offering table. Before her kneels a man, likely her husband, his arms raised in worship. The caption beneath reads, "She was revered by her husband." Not exactly the patriarchy you imagine, is it? In modern terms, we might say Egyptian society was patriarchal with loopholes. Yes, pharaohs were mostly male, and men held many top administrative posts. But women could own property, initiate divorce, run businesses, and, in rare but real cases, rule an empire, compared to women in many later societies, including Victorian England, colonial America, and even ancient Greece. They had surprising autonomy. There's a joke among Egyptologists. Women in ancient Egypt had more rights than women in 19th century France. It's not entirely wrong. You trail your fingers along the wall, dust catching under your nails. The scene beside you shows a woman receiving perfume jars from servants. At first glance, it screams luxury, but take a closer look. She's holding a scroll, not a mirror. She's working, recording inventory, ritual instructions, maybe even a will. You shuffle past another carving. This one's subtle, easy to miss. A small girl balances on her tiptoes to pour wine into a goblet held by a matron. Not unusual. But behind them, in tiny detail, another woman is chiseling a figure onto a stela. She's not the subject. She's the sculptor. Blink and you'll miss her. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Archaeologists once found a tomb with two coffins side by side, one male, one female. But DNA revealed the woman died years before him. She'd been buried first, with more goods. The assumption? He requested to be laid beside her later. Graveyard romance? Or maybe she just paid for the plot. Outside this tomb, in sun-bleached villages, women lived far more anonymous lives. Grinding grain, weaving linen, ferrying water from the Nile with baskets on their heads. But even there, their labor powered the entire civilization. As one ancient proverb put it, a house without a woman is like a barn without grain. You're starting to sense it now, the outline of a larger story. One history classes skimmed over, one that museums often whisper instead of shout. And you, lucky listener, are right in the middle of it. You wake up before dawn, again. The cool hush of early morning settles around you as you pad across the smooth stone floor. Your linen shift rustles softly. Outside, the first light of RA hasn't yet breached the horizon, but the hearth is already warm. A pot of barley simmers slowly, filling the house with its nutty, earthy aroma. You're not alone. Your daughters are already grinding flour by hand, while the boys chase goats from the sleeping courtyard. This isn't a royal palace. It's your home, and you, the matriarch, are the axis around which it all spins. Forget any assumptions you've absorbed about women in the ancient world being quiet, unseen, or forever indoors. Not in ancient Egypt. Here, you're not just a wife or a mother. You're an administrator of chaos, a logistics expert, and a spiritual anchor. You don't just run the household. You are the household. Today, you'll manage the food stores, negotiate with your husband about this season's tax payments, and double-check the oil jars before the priest visits. And if time allows, you'll sit down and replate the reed mat that your family prays on. And that's just before breakfast. You pass through a room where your youngest is stacking ceramic jars. You make a mental note to trade 2 of them at the market later. They're slightly chipped but still valuable. Your role here isn't ceremonial. You're the engine of the domestic economy. Historians still debate how much actual political power women had in private life, but the economic influence is harder to dispute. In records scratched onto ostraca, those convenient flakes of limestone used for note-taking, women are named as the ones organizing debts, distributing salaries to servants, even lending silver to neighbors with interest. That's right, interest. Your great-great-grandmother may have been an amateur banker, and it wasn't all spreadsheets and sorcery. One fringe text describes a woman named Rennie, who recorded lunar cycles in her home diary. Why? Possibly for religious reasons, or maybe, just maybe, to predict the best days to plant onions. It's hard to say, but the entries match celestial data exactly. Not bad for kitchen table science. You move outside as the sun warms the horizon. In your left hand is a basket of goods for trade. Spices, leftover bread, a few woven trinkets. In your right hand, the wrist of your oldest child, who's learning how to spot a good deal and a bad liar. She watches your every move. She hears how your tone shifts when you're speaking to a merchant, a priest, a servant. She sees that you're not asking for respect. You command it. A neighbor waves at you. Tia, a widow who owns 2 grain silos and 3 cats that seem to believe they own her. She's part of your circle. You've shared more than one evening swapping stories, stitching repairs, and rolling your eyes at your respective husband's attempts at cleverness. Do you remember when yours tried to trade for that fake turquoise? She'd laugh. You laugh now, even the memory. There's another carving in your house, this one small and rough. It shows a woman seated at a loom with the caption, "She who weaves order." Scholars argue about its meaning. Was it metaphorical? A play on words? A sacred duty? Or maybe it was just the truth. You return home before noon, your arms aching, your back sweaty, but your mind satisfied. You've struck 3 bargains, dodged 2 gossips, and earned a nod of approval from the priest's wife. Not bad. Before sleep takes you in the heat of afternoon, you double-check your ledger, the one you keep etched on a sliver of stone behind the oven. It's where you record every trade, every ration, every promise. You've lived through 2 failed floods, a locust bloom, and that time your cousin accidentally burned down the granary. You trust your records more than the gods. Tonight, when your family sleeps, you'll light a small oil lamp and whisper a blessing to Tarit, goddess of fertility and protection. Not because you're superstitious, because you've seen too much not to be. Mainstream histories often skim past women like you. They focus on kings and soldiers, not the ones who kept those soldiers fed and those kings funded. But you're the pulse of your home, the quiet architect of stability. And as you drift into sleep, you know tomorrow will look a lot like today. Demanding, delicate, yours. The morning sun glints off a stack of copper rings in your hand. You squint at them carefully. 5 solid weights, each representing a transaction, a promise, a plan. Behind you, your son is feeding the donkey. Beside you, your daughter is tallying yesterday's lentil yield by marking dots in the dirt with a stick. But here in your lap is the family's true heartbeat, its finances. You're not a queen. You're not even especially wealthy. But you run this house like a well-oiled machine, and coin by coin, ring by ring, you're keeping your family afloat. In ancient Egypt, women didn't need a male guardian to manage money. They could buy and sell land, loan and borrow silver, hire laborers, and file legal claims. That's not modern propaganda. It's written in contracts, stamped in wax, and buried with their bodies. Today, you're reviewing receipts from the last market day. Your handwriting is rough, more pictograph than perfect hieratic. But it's good enough. The neighbors know better than to cheat you. You caught men to once trying to shortchange your barley weight, and the look you gave him could have curdled milk. Historians still argue whether women had full parity in financial rights or their power was limited by unwritten social pressures. But the hard evidence, the clay tablets, the transaction records, suggests many women managed the household economy with stunning independence. You rise, dust off your palms, and check the jars near the hearth. 2/3 full. That's good. You'll ration just enough for a week, giving room for spoilage and for that surprise visit from your cousin who never brings his own bread. As you sit beneath the shade of a date palm, a memory surfaces, your grandmother's voice telling you, coins are like rain. Save some before the drought. You didn't understand it then. You do now. A quirky find in the tomb of a woman named Nebbit surfaced in the 1920s. A chest of neatly labeled jars, each containing a different type of grain. But what made it fascinating wasn't the contents. It was the math. Each jar had tally marks etched on the underside, revealing she had been keeping precise records of trade fluctuations. In barley, take that, Wall Street. You shake your head and smile. Somewhere, across the Nile, another woman is probably doing the same, sitting cross-legged, weighing oil or figs, muttering about inconsistent exchange rates. Your husband returns from the fields just before sunset, sweaty and tired, but he knows better than to ask how your day was. You've been managing 3 supplier disputes, 2 chicken-related injuries, and 1 neighbor who insists on arguing about the price of papyrus. Again, you slide him a bowl of stewed beans. He slides you a palmful of copper rings. A fair trade. Later that night, as the family gathers near the brazier, you recount the day's trade stories with flair. You make them laugh, especially the kids, who still think interest is something you show to guests, not something you charge them. But tucked under your sleeping mat is your ledger, a rolled scrap of parchment, not fancy, but full. Every ring you earned, every jar you traded, every promise you were paid in full or in part. It's your history book, your insurance, your weapon. Tomorrow, you'll head back into market. You'll haggle, outwit, and charm. Not because you have to, but because you can, because in a world of scribes and soldiers and priests, someone still needs to count the coins. And tonight, you sleep well knowing that someone is you. The morning buzz starts early in your neighborhood, but not from roosters, from looms. You step outside to a rhythmic thumping coming from 3 houses down. A woman's weaving frame taps like a heartbeat against a mud brick wall. Across the alley, 2 girls are dyeing flax threads in crimson dye made from crushed madder root. Their fingers are stained. Their smiles are smug. You taught them that color combination. You're not headed to the temple today. You're headed to your workshop. Yes, your workshop. Not a dusty storeroom tucked behind a husband's warehouse. A real, functioning space filled with hired hands, fiber bundles, drying racks, and ink pots. You run a textile operation that provides linen for half the block. You trained your sister. You trained your cousin. You even trained that one snooty neighbor who used to call you just a housewife. Egyptian women weren't just workers. They were bosses. They managed breweries, perfume shops, weaving houses, and even construction crews. If it brought in grain or copper, someone probably had a ledger for it. And that someone could very well be a woman. Historians still wrestle with just how widespread female business ownership was. Some argue these were elite exceptions. Others believe they were common, especially in urban areas. But when papyri mention women paying employees and filing complaints against suppliers, it paints a vivid picture. Today, you're inspecting a shipment of flax from a farmer downriver. The stalks are rougher than usual, sun-dried too fast. You purse your lips. Not good enough. You jot a message on a wax tablet and hand it to a courier boy. He'll deliver it, and the farmer will definitely get the message, especially since you've sent your broken loom string tied to it. At mid-morning, your apprentices arrive, 3 girls, 1 boy, and 1 older woman who knows more curses than the rest of you combined. You smile. The weaving begins. The looms beat in unison, a harmony of fiber and hands. But you don't just weave cloth, you weave community. As the day stretches on, clients trickle in. One wants a shawl for her daughter's engagement. Another needs bandages for a temple ritual. A priest's wife is requesting, very politely, a discreet consultation about sacred undergarments. You keep a straight face. Barely. Here's a fringe tidbit. One unearthed letter from Dar el-Medina describes a woman who brewed a perfume said to encourage affectionate behavior in stubborn husbands. The ingredients? Myrrh, coriander oil, and what was probably a bit of theater. Did it work? The husband's next letter is far more polite. You finish a design just before sunset, a geometric pattern of blue and gold meant to honor Hathor. Your hands ache, your back protests. But the fabric gleams like captured sunlight, and you know it'll last. One of your girls laughs as she struggles with the tension rod on her loom. You help her, gently, showing how to twist the fiber just so. She grins. You nod. Another weaver made. As the sky deepens into evening, you lock up the workshop and carry the best cloth samples home. You'll store them in sealed baskets, line them with herbs to keep the moths away. A house without linen is like a song without rhythm. Tonight, you'll dream of patterns, zigzags, lotus petals, falcon wings, designs that outlive their weavers. Some might end up buried with noble. Some might wrap a newborn. Some might be passed down to daughters you'll never meet. But they'll know you somehow through fiber, through thread. And when future hands run over the linen you made, perhaps they'll wonder who you were. And maybe, just maybe, they'll understand you were more than a name lost to time. You're up before the sun again, but this time, not for prayer or profit. You're going to market, not the dainty kind with perfumed baskets and flutes playing in the background. This one is loud. It's hot. It smells like garlic, fish, and someone's donkey that definitely shouldn't be parked that close to the grain stall. Your sandals slap against the dust-hardened road as you weave through stalls already shouting over each other. Men advertise pomegranates, baskets, and beeswax. But you don't stop for them. You head straight to the corner where the real business happens. The women's end. It's not marked, of course, but everyone knows where it is. It's where women trade gossip and garum, haggle over headscarves, and occasionally scream at a man trying to cut in line. You greet the bread seller, who already knows you want a middle loaf, not too dark, not too soft. You hand her a chipped amulet in exchange. She doesn't even check it. Trust. In ancient Egyptian cities, especially during the New Kingdom, marketplaces were hubs of female power. Women didn't just shop there. They ran stalls, bartered goods, and built reputations. They knew whose garlic was strongest, whose scales were rigged, and who secretly watered down their date wine. Spoiler alert, everyone. Historians still debate whether these women had licenses or operated under informal protection from temples or households. But the volume of records showing women involved in disputes over transactions says one thing loud and clear. They were very involved. You stop at a spice vendor whose prices have mysteriously gone up. You raise an eyebrow. He starts sweating. You reach into your satchel and pull out a folded slip of papyrus, the receipt from last week. You tap it, then the bag of cumin. He swallows hard and hands it over, mumbling something about inflation. You smile. That's your third win before breakfast. A quirky tidbit from the town of Cannes. Archaeologists uncovered a small clay tablet used for bartering sheep, signed not by a man but by 2 women, complete with thumbprints and a sarcastic line that translates loosely to, "Tell him I said it's enough." Passive-aggressive sheep trading. Timeless. You pause at the end of the row, where the herbalists set up shop. Their goods are less flashy. Bundles of dried papyrus root, bowls of crushed acacia, chunks of resin wrapped in linen. You ask for your usual, something to soothe your back after a long day weaving. The woman hands you a pouch and whispers, "Extra fenugreek this time, for your bones." You nod in thanks and hand her 2 small fish, salted just enough to survive the heat. As you turn to go, you notice a group of teenage girls watching you from behind a stall. They're whispering. One nudges the other forward. She steps up shyly and says, "Is it true you turned down a scribe's offer because he wouldn't meet your price?" You smirk. "No, I turned him down because he wouldn't stop talking about his ink collection." They laugh. You laugh. A lesson is passed on. By midday, your basket is full, your coin pouch lighter, and your patience thin. The sun is ruthless now, baking the street into a mirror of heat. You duck under a canopy to rest beside a woman selling handmade sandals. She offers you one for half price. You offer her a story instead. You tell her about the time you haggled with a nobleman's cook for a barrel of honey and walked away with a whole sheep instead. You leave out the part where the sheep ran away the next morning. As the day winds down, you make your way back home, ducking past a group of guards arguing over missing barley. You know exactly where it went. Everyone does. But no one says a word. Not out loud. Anyway, back home, your children help unpack. The oldest fingers the herbs, trying to guess the blend. The youngest pulls out the bread and takes a bite before you can stop her. You shake your head. Same as always. You lie back on your mat as the sky fades into orange. Today, like every market day, you weren't just buying and selling. You were asserting presence, owning space, building trust, not through war, not through wealth, but through reputation and the kind of clever, precise strength that never makes the history books, but shapes every story worth telling. And as you close your eyes, the scent of cumin still on your fingers, you know you'll return to the market soon. They'll be waiting. The temple is still and cool, the air thick with frankincense and murmured hymns. You step barefoot across polished stone, each footfall echoing against columns carved with prayers. You are not here as a worshiper today. You are here as a participant. The high priestess, yes, priestess, nods to you as you pass. You nod back. Neither of you speaks. You don't need to. You've rehearsed the rites too many times to count. You know the movements, the chants, the weight of sacred silence. In ancient Egypt, religion wasn't just a male enterprise. Women served as chantresses, dancers, priestesses of Hathor and Isis, and in rare cases, high priestesses in their own right. These weren't ornamental titles. They carried real authority, often managing temple finances, leading rituals, and even interpreting divine will. Historians still argue over how much influence these women had politically. Some temples gave them property and legal power. Others likely limited them to symbolic duties. But walk the corridors of any major sanctuary, and you'll find graffiti left behind by women who were clearly more than decoration. Today's ritual is from Ma'at, goddess of balance, truth, and justice. Fitting, you carry the palm frond, symbol of the year's passage. It must be laid precisely at the altar's edge, touching but not crossing the carved line. The crowd watches. You feel their breath more than their gaze. Behind you, a chorus of women begins to chant. Not loud, not showy, just steady like the Nile. You add your voice, and the sound weaves through the temple like smoke. It's ancient music, not written down, passed from mouth to ear to memory. You've spent years here, trained in cycles, moon phases, herb lore. You know how to calm a woman in labor and how to ask Hathor for rain. You also know when a ritual is political and when it's just a performance to keep the men calm. Here's a strange tidbit. One recovered temple scroll refers to a woman named Neti who was in charge of sacred intoxication festivals. Yes, those existed. Her role? To ensure revelers reach an appropriate level of divine ecstasy without vomiting on the altar. Divine balance, indeed. Later, you assist a young girl learning her first incantation. Her voice trembles. You don't scold her. You take her hand and place it on your chest so she can feel the rhythm of your breath. Like this, you whisper, let the gods ride your heartbeat. At dusk, as the ceremony concludes, you pour libation from a jar older than your grandmother. Water splashes over the altar, hissing slightly as it hits hot stone. A final blessing, a final promise. You leave the temple through the western gate, the one reserved for female officials. Outside, the air feels heavier, less sacred, more real. A child runs past with a broken reed flute. A donkey brays in the distance. But inside you, something remains still. It's easy to forget, in modern retellings, how entwined religion and daily life were. Your role in the temple isn't separate from your role at home. It's all one continuous act of caretaking. One for your family, one for your gods, and one for the balance that binds them. As you reach home, the scent of oil and lentils greets you. Your daughter hands you a half-burnt candle and says, "Wouldn't light for me." You smile and whisper a blessing over it, barely louder than the wind. It flares to life on the second try. And that, too, is a kind of miracle. The sandals you wear today are not your own. They are gold-plated, rigid, ceremonial. You feel their weight with every step as you ascend the white, limestone stairs of the palace. You are not a merchant, not a weaver, not a priestess. You are pharaoh, not queen consort, not regent, not the woman behind the throne. The throne is yours. Hatshepsut doesn't just break the mold. She melts it down and uses it to cast obelisks. Her rule is not accidental or reluctant. She seizes it steadily, with a hand that looks soft but commands armies. You walk beside her in this memory, cloaked in incense and linen, past banners that whisper her names, divine of diadems, foremost of noble ladies. Motker. Historians still argue whether she ruled from necessity or from ambition. Some say she stepped in only because her stepson was too young. Others say she manipulated the priesthood, rewrote her lineage, and wore the beard of kingship because she wanted power. Truth? Probably both. Power rarely comes from a single reason. She has no time for modesty. In her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, she inscribes entire walls with her birth from the god Ammonius, divine parentage to match her divine policies. You run your fingers across the hieroglyphs. They're deeply cut, intentional, like everything she did. And here's the kicker. It worked. Her reign is one of peace, wealth, architecture. The kind of prosperity kings kill for her. She achieved it by building, not breaking. There's a quirky relief in her temple, showing a trading mission to the land of Punt. The Queen of Punt is drawn with exaggerated rolls of fat, a rarity in Egyptian art. Some scholars call it mockery. Others believe it was admiration. Either way, the scene was Hatshepsut's doing, a flex in stone. You step in the throne room, silent except for the slap of those heavy gold sandals. Courtiers bow low, not because they love you, but because they respect you, or fear you, or both, and that's enough. You remember the day you ordered your likeness carved into obelisks, not as a woman disguised as a man, but as a sovereign, your features softened just enough to be ambiguous, your crown unmistakably royal. Behind the scenes, whispers followed you. Some said it was unnatural. Others said it was brilliant. You didn't care. You were pharaoh. The Nile still flooded. The granaries still filled. And the gods, it seemed, approved. At night, alone, you sometimes removed the ceremonial beard and stared at your reflection in polished bronze. Tired eyes, a determined mouth. You weren't pretending. You were proving. The men who came after you tried to erase you. Literally. They chiseled your name off walls, replaced your statues, buried your story in dust. But you were ready for that. You left your mark in too many places. And now, thousands of years later, someone is whispering your name into the quiet, not in fear, not in spite, but in wonder. As you step down from the throne, sandals echoing like a drumbeat, you remember what it meant to rule as a woman in a world of men, not in spite of your gender, but through it, not pretending to be a man, but daring to redefine what power looked like. The room smells like cedar and salt water, heavy with the perfume of diplomacy. You're not in Thebes anymore. You're in Alexandria. And the woman in the center of the marble chamber is Cleopatra VII, reclining among scrolls, papyrus maps, and a pyramid of imported figs. She isn't wearing a cobra crown today. Just a simple linen dress, one bare shoulder catching the lamplight. But don't let that fool you. Cleopatra is the sharpest mind in the room, and everyone knows it. You stand in the shadows, watching her speak Latin with ease, shift to Greek mid-sentence, and end in flawless Egyptian. The Roman emissary across from her blinks 3 times before he even knows he's been outmaneuvered. Cleopatra is history's favorite contradiction, painted as a seductress, but feared as a strategist. Her name is forever tethered to powerful men, Julius Caesar, Mark Antony. But that's not the whole story. It never was. Historians still argue whether she wielded genuine agency or was merely surviving a male-dominated empire by playing its game. Some claim her alliances were romantic gambits. Others say they were tactical decisions from a ruler who knew her kingdom couldn't survive without Roman favor. Either way, she chose. You stroll beside her through the royal library, where torchlight dances across scrolls older than memory. She pauses to pick one, reading aloud about lunar tides and eclipses. Even the moon obeys math, she murmurs. If only men did the same. She laughs at her own joke. So, do you? Quietly. Later, you watch her instruct her court on tax reforms. Her voice is measured, clear. She knows the grain quotas, the trade routes, the temple ledgers. This is no puppet queen. This is a ruler with spreadsheets in her head. And yet her public image? All eyeliner and romance. One quirky find in the ruins of her seaside palace was a small makeup kit with built-in ink compartments. Historians dubbed it the Queen's Dual Arsenal. War paint and words, side by side. As night falls, she hosts a private salon. Not a party, an ideological arena. Philosophers, poets, politicians, all lounging on cushions and sipping diluted wine. She listens more than she speaks. Then, when she finally does speak, her words cut cleaner than obsidian. She asks one man, an old advisor, what the role of a queen should be. To produce heirs, he says. She raises an eyebrow. Then why do my scrolls outnumber my sons? Silence. Cleopatra isn't merely ruling Egypt. She's embodying it. Her lineage traces back to Ptolemaic kings, Macedonian conquerors, and a dozen goddesses. But she crafts her identity like a mosaic, part myth, part mathematics. And when the tides turn, when Rome rises and whispers turn into declarations of war, she doesn't plead. She prepares. The stories say she died with dignity, wrapped in silk, a cobra nestled at her breast. Others suggest poison, or even political assassination disguised as suicide. The truth? Historians still don't know. But what they do know is this. Even in her final days, she made sure her death was her choice. A final move on a board full of men who underestimated her to the very end. You step away from the memories slowly, as if leaving a room full of mirrors. Her voice lingers. I was not made to be remembered as someone's lover, she says. I was made to be remembered. And so she is. The sun sets gently over the cliffs of Thebes, casting long shadows over a tomb carved into the rock. You duck your head as you enter, your fingers grazing the painted lintel. Lotus blossoms, ankhs, and, oddly enough, a line of hieroglyphs shaped like a poem. Inside, the air is dry and still. And there she is. Nefertari. No, not just a queen. The queen, beloved wife of Ramesses II, honored in life and worshipped in death. You stand before the walls of her tomb, considered by many the most beautiful in the Valley of the Queens. But what strikes you isn't just the colors or the craftsmanship. It's the way she's portrayed, not as an accessory, not as a footnote, but as a scholar, a priestess, a figure of wisdom and calm. Nefertari's tomb is filled with text, actual writing, verses from the Book of the Dead, prayers to Hathor, protective spells, all inscribed in her honor, not for Ramesses, not for a priest, for her. Historians still debate whether Nefertari herself was literate. Some believe she composed parts of the prayers that adorn her tomb. Others argue the texts were simply bestowed upon her by temple scribes. But the effect is the same, a woman associated with wisdom, with sacred knowledge, with voice. You pass a mural showing her in flowing white linen, playing the sistrum, an ancient rattle used in temple music. She stands before Isis, arms outstretched in reverence. But look closer and you'll notice Isis is mirroring her. Equal posture, equal power. And then there's her cartouche, her name, enclosed in an oval of protection. It appears again and again, carved so deeply that it would survive erosion, looting, time itself. Ramesses may have built temples that touched the clouds, but Nefertari built something quieter: memory. Here's a delightful fringe fact. In her tomb, a tiny inscription describes her as she for whom the sun rises. Not a poetic flourish, a title. Scholars can't agree on whether it's literal, spiritual, or romantic. Probably all three. As you step through chamber after chamber, the walls pulse with color, still vivid after millennia. Deep blues, ochres, golds. She's shown playing games, receiving perfume, consulting gods. This is not a woman reduced to childbirth and shadow. This is someone who ruled beside her husband, not behind him. Outside the tomb, in the heat of daylight, you imagine her seated in a garden court, dictating a letter to a temple official. Perhaps she's reviewing the construction of a new shrine. Perhaps she's requesting a shipment of lapis lazuli. Or perhaps, just perhaps, she's writing a lullaby for one of her daughters. In the quiet of that vision, you see something even more profound than power. You see peace. Nefertari's strength wasn't in conquest, but in continuity, in keeping the gods close, the ritual steady, the family anchored. She didn't need to wear a beard or command a navy. She just needed to be heard. You exit the tomb slowly, the light almost too bright after the tomb's dusk. You turn back for one last look, and there, above the doorway, carved with quiet certainty, is her name again, still protected, still present, still rising with the sun. It starts with a knock at the door. Not the loud, urgent kind, but a careful one. 3 soft taps. A pause. Then 2 more. You recognize the rhythm. It's the neighbor's niece, and she's in labor. You grab your satchel without a word. It's already packed. Honey, linen strips, lotus salve, a bronze blade for cutting the cord, and a small wooden figurine of Tarit, the hippo-shaped goddess who guards childbirth. You slip on your sandals and step into the warm night. You are not just a mother or a trader or a worshiper. Tonight, you are a healer. In ancient Egypt, midwifery and medicine often went hand in hand. Women passed down remedies, treatments, and rituals from mother to daughter, sometimes enhanced by temple instruction or scrolls borrowed quietly from priests. They weren't just guessing. They were applying generations of observational science wrapped in incense and prayer. Historians still argue how formalized this medical knowledge really was. Some believe female healers operated independently, while others think they were tied to temple systems. Either way, their hands knew the human body better than most scribes ever would. You arrive at the house and find the mother-to-be sitting on a birthing stool, surrounded by ants. The air is thick with heat and whispers. You calm the room with a single look, kneel beside her, and feel the tension in her belly. The child is close. You begin the chant. It's not magic, but it is memory. A rhythm of breath and tone that steadies the pulse, distracts from pain, and reminds everyone present, you've done this before. Many, many times. There's a quirky medical papyrus called the Gynecological Papyrus, one of the oldest known medical texts. It includes treatments for everything from fertility issues to headaches, many involving honey, garlic, and, somehow, crocodile dung. Let's just say you have your own recipe book, and it skips the dung. The birth is slow, steady. The woman cries out once, twice, then silence, then the sound every healer waits for, a sharp inhale, a baby's first cry. You wrap the child quickly, place it on the mother's chest, and whisper a thanks to Hathor under your breath. You're sweaty, your knees ache, and someone spilled oil on your best sash. But it doesn't matter. Another life safely into the world. Another secret only women share. You stay for an hour afterward, checking the mother's pulse, massaging her feet with mint oil, adjusting the window mat, so the breeze hits her face just right. You don't speak much. You don't need to. Before you leave, a young girl, the mother sister, touches your elbow. "Can I learn?" she asks. You nod. Of course, because this knowledge isn't just yours. It's never been just yours. Back home, you hang your satchel by the door and wash your hands slowly in scented water. The herbs in your bag are mixed by feel, the tools worn smooth by time. And the goddess figurine? She watches from the shelf, smiling with those wide, protective eyes. Healing in ancient Egypt was never sterile. It was earthy, emotional, intuitive. Sometimes it smelled like jasmine, sometimes like sweat. Always it smelled like life. And in that scent, you find your rest at night, knowing that someone breathes easier somewhere because of you. You stand just outside the governor's hall, squinting in the midday sun. You're dressed simply today. No jewelry, no perfume, just a clean linen dress and your most serious look. On your arm, a small leather scroll is tucked tight, the seal still unbroken. It's not a love letter. It's a land deed. And you're not here for permission. You're here for enforcement. In ancient Egypt, women could inherit, own, and bequeath property entirely separate from their husbands. Marriage didn't erase their legal identity. A woman could sue and be sued, sign contracts, and even adopt heirs. In theory, she was her own legal person. In practice, well, it depended. Historians still argue whether all women had this access, or if it was limited to elite classes or specific regions. But the papyri don't lie. Women show up again and again in lawsuits, inheritance disputes, and even courtroom showdowns, armed with contracts and confidence. Today, you're challenging a cousin who's trying to snatch your grandmother's vineyard by forgetting that her will left it to you. Nice try. Inside the hall, scribes line the walls like human statues. The air buzzes with murmured petitions and the scratch of reed pens on papyrus. You step forward when your name is called. The judge, an older man with eyebrows like sleeping cats, barely glances at you, but you don't flinch. You unroll your scroll and begin to speak. Clear, loud, unapologetic. You quote the will. You present the boundary markers. You point out that your cousin conveniently omitted your name when filing his claim. You remind the judge that you were the one tending those vines when the Nile flooded last season, not him, and you do it all without raising your voice. There's a fringe tidbit from a legal document in L Line, where a woman named Teddy took her own brother to court over a disputed fig orchard and won. The record ends with a single, beautifully dismissive phrase: "The figs remain hers." You intend for your grapes to do the same. The judge listens. He frowns. He squints. Then he stamps your scroll with his signet and says, "It is done." Just like that. Outside, your cousin glares. You offer a polite nod, a smirk, even. Then you walk home slowly, enjoying the taste of justice. Back in your courtyard, you pass under the shade of the very vines in question. They're scraggly but healthy. You pluck one grape. Tart. Just right. You sit and update your own legal scrolls, names, dates, amounts owed. Your children watch. Your daughter asks why you write everything down. Because memory fades, you say, but ink does not. Later, a neighbor stops by to ask your advice. Her husband's debts are threatening to swallow her estate. You explain how to petition the assets, how to appeal to the local council, and where to find the least corrupt scribe in town. Not your first time giving this speech. You may not wear a judge's robe, but in your own quiet way, you uphold law every day. With every contract you honor, every boundary you maintain, and every daughter you teach how to stand her ground. And as the sun sets, you look out over your vineyard, yours, and breathe deep. Justice smells like grape leaves and fresh ink. Dust clings to your fingertips as you trace a painted wall. Ochre, turquoise, faded black. You're deep inside a tomb again, but this one's different. It's not royal, not grand, but it's intimate. The mural before you shows a festival scene. Women dancing, their arms curved like reeds in the wind. Faces painted with kohl, hair styled in elaborate braids. A small girl watches from the corner, eyes wide. In the next scene, they are seated around a table. Bread, fruit, wine. One woman offers a lotus flower to another, and above them, a single line of hieroglyphs. May she feast in the field of reeds. You're not looking at power here. You're looking at memory. In ancient Egyptian burial practices, tombs were more than resting places. They were biographies carved in stone. Women may not have had statues in every square, but in the painted walls of their tombs, they lived fully. Their joys, rituals, and relationships were depicted with care. Their hands held tambourines, not swords. Their strength was quieter, but not less sacred. Historians still argue whether these scenes were literal representations of daily life or idealized visions of the afterlife. Did these women truly host such festivals? Or were the murals more like dreams of what heaven should be? Either way, they chose what to remember. In one tomb outside Saqqara, archaeologists found a fragment of wall showing a woman teaching her daughter how to write her name. Not a priest, not a scribe, a mother. The paint was chipped, but the strokes were strong. A fringe artifact, yes, but one that whispers louder than gold. You continue deeper. The scenes shift. Now the women are shown offering perfume to Hathor, or weaving linen, or writing letters to the dead. One inscription reads, "To my sister I send oil and songs. May you dream sweetly until we meet again." It's not poetic. It's practical. A message sent across eternity. You pause at a wall showing a funeral. A woman stands at the head of a line of mourners, arms raised. She is not wailing. She is leading. Below her, 2 cats curl around her feet, a symbol of protection, but also a personality. Cats were sacred, yes, but also companions. She chose to be remembered with hers. Outside the tomb, life hums along. A boy chases a hoop down the road. A vendor sings about onions. A girl balances a jar on her head, grinning as it wobbles. But in here, in this cool hush, you hear the women who came before. They left no thrones, no wars, no decrees, but they left stories. Stories in color, stories in silence. And they trusted someone, maybe you, to come back and read them. You reach the final wall and find a small line of text beneath a flower. No figure, no portrait, just a sentence. I was here. I was loved. That is enough. You step back. The dust on your fingertips has turned to pigment. You press your palm to the stone, softly. Maybe someone will paint you one day, dancing, laughing, or simply whispering into the walls. And maybe that will be enough too. You're sitting on a reed mat in the back of a small, sunlit house. The walls are whitewashed. The air smells faintly of crushed herbs, and the table before you is covered in scrolls. A young woman frowns as she copies symbols onto a wax tablet, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. Again, you say gently. She sighs, then writes the sentence again, this time straighter, sharper. You nod. Progress. You're a teacher now, not in some temple archive, not under the eye of a royal patron. Just here, at home, teaching writing to girls whose names won't end up on monuments, but whose minds are monuments themselves. It might surprise modern ears, but literacy in ancient Egypt was not entirely reserved for men. It was rare, yes. Formal schooling was dominated by boys. But the walls of history have cracks, and through them we glimpse the scribes, midwives, and record keepers who were women. Historians still argue over how widespread female literacy really was. Some claim it was limited to priestesses and elites. Others point to household ledgers and annotated charms as signs that more women could read and write than we assume. The truth, as always, likely lies somewhere in the margins. You look up as another student enters, a healer's apprentice, covered in a faint sheen of sweat and camphor. She sets down a small clay figurine and asks about a prayer she's struggling to memorize. You recite it softly. She listens, then copies it carefully onto palm bark. Here's a fringe delight for you. A worn scrap of papyrus found in Deir el-Medina shows a shopping list annotated with snarky asides. It reads, linen for aunt, oil for the priest, bread not the dry kind. The handwriting? Female. The sass? Eternal. You shift roles midday, from scribe to midwife, from teacher to memory keeper. A neighbor brings over an old amulet with half-erased inscriptions. Can you restore it? She asks. You study the text, recognizing symbols passed down through centuries. It's a blessing, fragmented but still strong. You trace it with a reed pen, re-inking the ancient lines, not changing them, just bringing them back to light. Tonight, your home fills with women, some young, some bent with age. You host a moon circle, not for magic, but for storytelling. One woman shares how her grandmother fought off raiders by tipping a beehive off her roof. Another remembers a dream that led her to dig up an old silver ring, now believed to be protective. They all look at you when it's your turn. You tell them a story not from the temples or tombs, but from your own life. The time you wrote a love poem and slipped it into a grain sack, only to discover later it ended up on a merchant ship bound for Nubia. The poem returned with a better ending, and an extra bag of salt. Laughter ripples through the room. This is how culture survives. Not in monuments, not just in law, but in handwriting, in herbal remedies, in jokes carved beside to-do lists, in songs sung while cleaning lentils, in little lessons passed between generations, like beads on a thread. As the fire dims, you help a student close her scroll. Her ink smudges a little. She curses under her breath. You smile. Good, you say. It means it's yours now. And in that moment, you understand, not every woman needs a statue. Some just need a pen, and someone to remind them it's okay to use it. A warm wind rises from a Nile as you walk the edge of your village, hem of your dress brushing wild reeds. You pass the temple wall where your gray tan's name is etched, barely visible now, but still there, still resisting the centuries. A fisherman nods as you pass. Two boys wrestle in the dust, pretending to be soldiers. You remember when your brothers used to do the same. But something in the air feels different today. It's not the heat, it's the hum of change. Distant, subtle, like the creak of a door that's never been opened. And suddenly, you're not in ancient Egypt anymore. Not exactly. You're flickering between time. You blink, and there she is, a woman in jeans and a headscarf, clutching a laptop, arguing with a man about property rights. You blink again. A young girl with a science textbook, nose buried in footnotes, rewriting the margins with her own observations. Then another, marching the street, eyes forward, banner raised. It's still you. All of them. Different faces. Different eras. Same thread. Because what began in ink and linen and temple chants has somehow survived. The wisdom. The defiance. The sheer unwillingness to be forgotten. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptian women truly influenced modern feminism. Some say it's a coincidence. Others call it a cultural echo. A whisper passed down across dynasties, deserts, languages, not through bloodlines, but through example. And here's the fringe theory that makes you smile. A few scholars believe early Greek philosophers, Plato among them, were inspired by Egyptian models of female education and equality, not often cited, rarely celebrated, but it's there buried in old writings, like a seed waiting for the right soil. You cross the river in your memory, balancing on a flat-bottomed ferry. Next to you, a girl asks about Nefertari. You tell her she ruled with ink, not war. Another asks about Cleopatra. She wrote letters in 3 languages. You answer. She lost battles, but never her voice. The questions keep coming. What about the women who weren't queens? You pause. They raised them. Modern life, you realize, carries so many of the same burdens. Balancing work and home, fighting for voice, protecting family while chasing dreams. The tools have changed, but the work? Still sacred, still exhausting, still so often invisible. Tonight, a scholar in London will write a paper about temple priestesses. A girl in Luxor will sketch a tomb she saw on a school trip. A coder in Mumbai will create a digital archive of ancient scripts. And somewhere, maybe right now, someone will wonder, were ancient women really this powerful? And you'll be standing at the edge of that question, smiling, because you were never waiting to be discovered. You were always there, quiet, yes, but never gone. As the sun lowers and the Nile turns to silver, you whisper into the wind a line you learned long ago. I was more than they told you. And now, someone finally listens. You sit beneath a sycamore tree, its shade soft and dappled, flickering over the papyrus scroll in your lap. A gentle breeze tugs at the edges. You don't write this time. You just read. It's a story, or rather, many stories. fragmented, faded, left behind in the margins of tombs, in the folds of burial linen, in the pigments that still cling to forgotten walls. They're all about women, not all of them famous, not all of them royal, but each one real. A perfume maker who passed her formulas to her daughter with instructions written in crushed rose petals. A woman who trained her cat to fetch sandals. Don't laugh, it's carved in a tomb. A widow who started a grain business because her late husband never did learn how to barter properly. A mother who kept a record of every one of her children's dreams on scraps of ostraca, just in case the gods wanted a reference. You close your eyes and imagine all of them, walking the same dusty roads, drawing water from the same river, dreaming beneath the same stars. Their names may be lost, but their fingerprints are everywhere. Historians still debate how many stories are waiting to be found. How many lie beneath sand dunes, behind sealed doors, inside museum archives labeled miscellaneous female figure, unknown. But you know this much. The stories are there. They always were. And here's your final fringe fact. In a small, rarely visited tomb in Thebes, there's a faded painting of two women sitting side by side. One pours wine, the other writes. Above them, a single line of text. We lived. We learned. We laughed. Scholars can't agree if it's literal or metaphorical. Doesn't matter. It feels true. You reach the end of the scroll and look up at the horizon. This isn't the end of a history lesson. It's the beginning of a memory, shared now between us. A whisper across time that says, they were here. They mattered. And so do you. So now, as the night wraps gently around you, let all these women settle softly into your thoughts. Let their woven cloth and ink scrolls drape over you like warm linen. Let their laughter echo quietly, like the hum of bees near flowering papyrus. You walk with queens and merchants, scribes and midwives. You've bartered at the market, whispered in temples, and held a newborn wrapped in reeds and hope. You've stepped through history not as a spectator, but as a companion, as someone meant to witness and carry it forward. You don't need to remember every date or name, just the feeling that even in a world ruled by pharaohs and gods, women carved out spaces of power, grace, humor, and grit. You carry them now. So take one last breath. Let it fill your chest and fall away slowly, like river mist at dawn. Let the stories fade into silence, like firelight softening into ember. And when you sleep tonight, may your dreams be gentle. May they be filled with the scent of crushed myrrh, the rustle of palm leaves, the distant music of sistrums. And may you wake tomorrow with a little more wonder, a little more reverence for the quiet power that shaped the ancient world and still lives in all of us.